So glad you are spending just a little bit of your time this Christmas with us. Now, put these away because during the message, you do not vote. Like, is this a epic or fail message? Just put these away. These are for another week. But if I asked you, what is your all-time, I'll go ahead and pick it up. What is your all-time most epic Christmas ever? Would you have an answer for that? As you look back in time, would you be able to point to one specific Christmas that is the best Christmas ever for you? Would you? Think about it. Some of you are like, yeah, some of you, no. For me, it's a no-brainer. For me, hands down, without a doubt, it's December 25th of 1999. Because on that Christmas day, my wife and I and our two girls, we got on an airplane. This is an airplane. We got on an airplane, and we traveled 815 miles to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. From there, we got in a car, and we showed up at my parents' house, unexpected, unannounced, and we surprised their socks off. They had no idea that we were coming. Best Christmas ever. Best Christmas ever. Now you say, well, that doesn't sound like a big deal to me. But just so you know, as a pastor, we usually have a lot of Christmas services. And living hundreds of miles away from the hometown where I grew up in, it's been very, very difficult for us to be home on Christmas Day. In fact, in 30 years, we were home a total of, you ready for this? One time on Christmas Day in 30 years. And guess what year it was? Yeah, it was December 25th, 1999. And what made that Christmas so epic is this. We made that Christmas personal. Yeah, we broke the 815-mile barrier, Minnesota to Pennsylvania. We broke that barrier, and we showed up literally, and we showed up literally, and we showed up physically. We didn't have the normal Christmas Day phone call. This is a phone. Hey, Mom, Dad, miss you. Wish we were there. We love you. Thanks for the t-shirts and the socks and the sweater, whatever. No, that day we showed up and we gave real hugs. And we're Italians. We give real hugs and real kisses. And we spoke real words of I love you and Merry Christmas to them. Best Christmas ever. Because we made it personal. We literally and we physically showed up. Which, by the way, is exactly what God did a little over 2,020 years ago. What did God do? God showed up. God literally and God physically showed up in a specific way at a specific time in history about 5 miles to the south of Jerusalem. He showed up in a little town called, you're so good, yeah, Bethlehem. In fact, Luke, who was a first century physician who recorded all of the events of the life of Jesus, he records for us what happened on that very first Christmas. So if you want to look at a Bible, you can open it up. If you want to know where the Christmas story is, it's Luke chapter 2. I'm also going to show it to you on the screen. Luke chapter 2. I'll give you just a second if you want to find it, though. It's a pretty cool story, and this is what Christmas is all about. Here it is. Luke chapter 2. At that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Lots of details here. What do you expect for a physician, right? All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for the census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. And there it is, friends. God literally and God physically left heaven, broke the heaven to earth barrier, and he came. He came in a real place at a real time. And you need to understand this, that God showed up, why? To show us something. God staged a demonstration. Why? To demonstrate something for us. And what I hope to do with you today on this Christmas Eve day is I hope to show you what it is that he came to show us. I hope to demonstrate for you what God came and staged the demonstration to demonstrate to us. This is so important because I think for us, I know I'll just speak for myself, it's so easy for us sometimes to get lost in this Christmas story. Not the Santa and reindeer version, but the Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus story. Because for us, it's oftentimes, the problem is it's so impersonal, right? It's so impersonal. It's almost as if you expect Luke in chapter 2, as he's writing about the birth account of Jesus, to say these words. It all happened long ago in a galaxy far away. Now, some of you Star Wars people are saying, that's close, but that's not quite right. I get it. No, I get it. It's almost as if it could start that way. It all happened long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away. Because the story sounds so, what? So impersonal to us. I mean, we don't live in a world of shepherds, right? Did anybody pass any shepherds on their way to a Crossroads campus today? No. We don't live in a world of wise men, do we? Go ahead and insert your own joke. Yeah, especially not in Washington. Yeah, whatever. I get it. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I have not heard angels sing, lately. And I have not been around a stable where a baby was sitting in a feeding trough, in a manger. I've not been around that. And I've not bumped into any pregnant virgin teenagers these days. Have you? And again, that's what makes this story so impersonal. Long ago, in a galaxy far, far away. And so what I want to do today with you, with your permission, I'm going to do it either way, by the way, I want to flip Christmas over. I want to take Christmas and I want to flip it over because I want us to look at it from a different angle. I want us to look at it through fresh eyes because fresh eyes are the best eyes. We're going to look at it from a different perspective today. And to do that, we need to go in our Bibles to the New Testament to a guy named Paul who met Jesus, who was converted to become a follower of Jesus in about 35 AD. He writes many, prolific writer of most of our New Testament, actually. But he wrote something in a letter, we call it Galatians, that's going to help us understand this story. And my prayer is to make this story personal. Look up here for just a moment at all of our campuses. I believe this story is not an impersonal story at all. In fact, I believe that this story, when we look at it the right way, has the power, you ready for this? To change your life and to change my life. And it's all how we look at it. So this is my prayer today as we flip it over, that this story will become personal for you and for me. So with that in mind, Galatians chapter 4, and here's what Paul writes. Paul writes, but when the right time came, I want you to note those two words. When the right time came, what did God do? What did God do? Think about the very first Christmas. God sent his son, born of a woman. Now, let's just stop right there and call a little time out here. I really cannot tell you why it was the right time about 2020 years ago. I really can't. What I do know is up to that point in human history, God was trying to get the attention and the affection of his people. In fact, God entered into an agreement about 2,000 years prior to the birth of Jesus. God entered into an agreement with a group of people, a tiny little nation. He chose them, the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, the nation of Israel. He chose them. And he said to this tiny little nation, he said, I'm going to use you. First of all, I choose you, but I'm going to use you to bless the entire world. I'm going to choose you and use you to bless the entire world. He said to this little nation, he said, I'm going to choose you and I'm going to make myself known to the entire world through you. And then he started to give them laws to live by. If you've ever tried to read through the Old Testament, lots of laws, right? The Hebrews were given a lot, hundreds of laws. He sent them prophets. He sent them priests. He sent them kings. He gave them animals to sacrifice, to atone or to cover their sins. And he had several agreements that he entered into them. These agreements were called covenants. They were called covenants, which they in turn, these Hebrew people, these Jewish people, promptly broke them left and right. He would give them agreements, they would break them, give them agreements, they would break them, they would break them and break them. And 2,000 years after Abraham came onto the scene and had that first one done, 2,000 years later, before Jesus was born, I'll just sum up human history this way. In God's eyes, it wasn't working. This whole religious experiment, the prophets and the priests and the kings and the laws and the animals and the tabernacles and the temples and all this stuff, 2,000 years after doing it, here's the conclusion: it wasn't working. And that's why Paul tells us, and then, when the right time came, God sent his son, born to a woman. It's not working. So God sent his son to this earth, born of a woman. And it's as if God was saying to the world, it's time to take things to a whole nother level. It's time. Because the world 2,020 years ago or so, before Jesus was born, didn't need any more laws. And they didn't need any more priests. They didn't need any more prophets or kings or animals to sacrifice. They needed something else. And God sent his son to give them the something else. God showed up. God showed up to show them something. God staged a demonstration to demonstrate something for them. He made it personal. And all of a sudden, this once upon a time, long ago in a galaxy far, far away story, all of a sudden now, because God made it personal and showed up onto the scene, because God came in a bod and showed up, God in a bod. That's worthy of your Twitter right there. You're tweeting out. God showed up very personally and very real. And all of a sudden, this impersonal story became what? Personal. It became real. And all of a sudden, this God that the Israelites would maybe say was unknowable and unreachable and distant and removed, all of a sudden, this God, because God flipped it over, all of a sudden, this God became very, very knowable and very touchable. And might I add, very huggable. And all of a sudden, this thing that was for just a very specific group of people, i.e. the Jewish people, all of a sudden, it became good news, as the angel declared, for the entire world. You see, you have to understand something, friends. Up to this point in human history, God was feared. The Jewish people were afraid of God. They even thought that being in God's presence or getting a glimpse of God meant death. That's why they didn't even speak the name of God. They did not say the Hebrew name for God, Yahweh. They didn't say it out loud because they were afraid if they said it or if they were in God's presence that they would be doomed. In fact, just once a year, the high priest would go into what was called the Holy of Holies just once a year, which is where the presence of God dwelt. He would go in once a year, and it was once a year that he would offer sacrifices on behalf of all the Jewish people. And even when he walked into the Holy of Holies, guess what he did? Guess what they did? They would tie a rope around his ankle because they were afraid that when he was in the presence of God, God might zap him. And so they tied a rope around his ankle just in case, and then they would pull him out. I'm not making this stuff up, by the way. Some of you are like, really? Yeah, no, that's true. And then everything changed. And then God showed up, and then God staged a demonstration. Let's get back to it, okay? Galatians chapter 4. But when the right time came, God sent his son, born of a woman. God sent him to, now from here on, gang, look at me. From here on is the story of Christmas. From here on is the why behind why Jesus came to earth. What did he do? Well, he came to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law so that he could adopt us as his very own children. If I asked you right now, what are the two reasons why Jesus came to earth? What would you say? Pretty easy, isn't it? I underlined the reasons for you. Yeah, I'd like to make it easy here at Crossroads for everybody. Why did Jesus come at Christmas? Well, God's Son came to earth for two very, very personal reasons, to do two very personal things. Number one, you saw it, to buy freedom for us, right? You say, I don't get that. Freedom? What is that all about? Well, you have to understand this about sin. Here's the deal about sin. Don't write this down. It's fun. You never heard a pastor say that probably, but sin is fun for a while, isn't it? But the thing about sin that you have to understand is this. Sin has a gotcha. It has a gotcha. It may be fun for a while, but sin has a gotcha. It'll grab onto you, and it will enslave you. And if you let it go and let it go and let it go, it will lead to death. Death of a family, death of a character, death of integrity. It leads to death. In fact, it leads to separation, ultimately, between ourselves and God. And that's why Jesus came, to set us free from sin and the grip that it has on us, from sin and its consequences. And how did he purchase our freedom? You know this. He died on the cross. We have nativity scenes and we try to reenact all this stuff, but you never understand the story of Christmas until you put a cross somewhere in that nativity scene. Because the baby was born to die. He came to purchase our freedom. And the way he did that was by shedding his own blood so that we could be forgiven and so that we could be set free from the consequences of sin. But there's more. There's more. The second thing he did was he came to adopt us into his forever family. In other words, God said, you know what? I want to forgive you. So I'm going to send my son to die on a cross, shed his blood for you and your sins. But I don't want to stop there. I want you to be free from sin and its consequences. Yeah. But even more so, world, even more so, people at Crossroads Church, I want you in my forever family. You see, I choose you and 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 you. I choose you to be adopted into my family. I want you to be my adopted sons and my adopted daughters. Is there anything, friends, more personal than that? Than God choosing us to be part of his forever family? Is there? Galatians chapter 4 gives us the why of Christmas. And what I want to do, I want to give you a Christmas gift and sum it all up for you in one sentence. Here it is. Sin has a gotcha, so Jesus came at Christmas to get you. That's it. Wherever it went, there it is. That's it. Sin has a gotcha, so God leaves heaven, comes to earth to get you, to forgive you, to set you free from sin and its consequences, and to adopt you into his forever family. Come on. This is it right here. He could have sent a Christmas card and a Starbucks gift card, which, by the way, I would have taken, come on. But aren't you glad he did so much more? Aren't you glad he made it personal? Aren't you glad he came? Aren't you glad he did what he did for you and for me? I'm so glad he did, friends. I'm so glad he did. You see, he could have sent a card, yeah, love your world. But since words really don't matter a whole lot these days, now and back then, since actions speak louder than words, he showed up. He showed up. And let me just ask you this question. Think about this. How would we know? How would we know where we stood with God had God not come to stand with us? How would we ever know? How would we ever know that God really loved us had God not come on his hands and knees and showed us that kind of love? How? He came to show us that he was for us by being with us. And he experienced everything you've ever experienced on this earth. You know, I know we like to paint little Jesus with the glow around him and, bullets bounced off of him and all that kind of, it wasn't true, friends. He was fully human being while he walked this planet. He felt everything that you felt and I felt. Every pain, every disappointment, every heartache, every fear, every anxious thought, every bit of grief that you've ever felt. You see, here's the truth, friends. For love to be known, it has to be shown. And that's exactly what God was doing over 2,020 years ago when God sent his son to inhabit a body. He was showing us just how much he loves us. And then 33 years later, just to make sure that everybody got the picture, just to make sure everybody got the message, just to kind of clear up any kind of doubt about whether or not God loves us, what did he do? Jesus climbed up on a cross and he died, not for his sins, but for mine and yours. Here's Christmas. God made it personal so that we could know him personally. If anybody ever asks you what Christmas is all about, you can go and tell them about the toys and the trees and the tinsel and all that stuff. It's okay. But what Christmas is all about is right here. Christmas is all about God who made it personal so that you, so that I, so that we could know him personally. That's why he took the very first step as a baby in Bethlehem. And that's why he took the very painful step up onto a cross where he bled and died for you and me so that we could know him personally. The next step, it's yours. And the next step is mine. Now, here's what I know about you, and you need to know this about me. We don't need any more religious laws, right? And we don't need any more religious guilt, right? Just like we don't need any more socks and t-shirts and ties for Christmas. We don't need any more of that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you what I want, and I hope it's what you want, is this. If God's real, don't we want to know him personally? I mean, if God is really real, if God really exists, we want to know him in a personal way. So my question to you today for you is this. Will you flip Christmas from being some kind of a long ago in a galaxy far away story that's so impersonal to you? Will you flip it, and will you today, maybe for the very first time, will you make it personal? Will you? Because I believe that God is orchestrating a moment right now for several of us to maybe for the very first time say yes to that love. Maybe for the very first time, you are going to say yes to what Jesus came to earth to give you: forgiveness of your sins, freedom from sin and its consequences, and maybe for the very first time, you are going to say yes to his offer to adopt you into his forever family. He's created a moment right now for you to do that. Will you seize that moment? Best Christmas ever. December 25th, 1999. God created a moment that my wife and I and our two girls, we seized. Best Christmas ever. Not because we surprised the socks off my mom and dad. No, it became so much bigger and so much greater than that. The day before we were supposed to leave on an airplane back to Minnesota, my mother got a headache while she was making supper. Told her to go lay down, and she did. And within a few minutes, she died of a brain aneurysm. She died. Never saw that coming. Never saw it coming. But I am so glad in retrospect that God orchestrated a moment for us to be there one time in 30 years to be there and spend those 6 days or so with her in a very real, a very personal, and a very intimate way. I can't imagine right now, if we had not seized that moment, how I would look at Christmas of 1999. It would not be the best Christmas ever. It would be the worst Christmas ever for me. But because we made it personal, because we showed up and spent that time with her, it's now the best Christmas ever. And I believe that God has created a moment for some of you right now. You're not here by mistake. You're here for a reason. And God created this moment for you, maybe for the very first time, to make it personal and to accept this Jesus and what he's done for you into your life. Here's what I know. Love, Jesus, is knocking on your heart's door. And the question is, will you open that door and make it personal and allow him to come into your life, forgive you? Yeah. Adopt you? Absolutely. And I believe if you will, it just may be your best Christmas ever. So let me pray for you. Let me pray. And Jesus, we want to pause in this moment right now and thank you for making it personal for us. Thank you for pursuing us, Jesus, at Bethlehem. Thank you for pursuing us all the way to the cross. And thank you for pursuing us right now on this Christmas Eve. Thank you for knocking on our heart's door. And I pray that every one of us would make it personal and say yes to you today. The question, Jesus, is not, do you love us? The question, Jesus, is, what have we done? What have we done to deserve the kind of love that you have shown us? Help us to wrestle with that now, we pray. In your name, amen.